Hello and welcome to another episode of A Fresh Perspective with Jeff Charles, with your boy Jeff Charles, where we prefer, we prefer truth over narrative and principles over politics. And I've got an amazing guest for you guys today. I'm very, very, very excited about this, and I think you guys are really going to enjoy this, especially if you come at things from a Christian perspective, and especially if you have an appreciation for history and the Constitution and all that great stuff. But before we get into everything, you know what you got to do. You got to like this video. You got to share this video, and you have to subscribe. If you haven't subscribed, what's going on in your life? Hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell. That way you'll be notified whenever I upload a new interview, which happens every Wednesday and Friday evening at 7 o'clock Eastern time. So without further ado, I'm just gonna bring him on because I'm too excited. I'm too excited about my guest here. I've got America's Constitution coach and founder of Patriot Academy. I give you the illustrious Rick Green. How you doing, brother?
Hey, man, good to be with you. I'm looking forward to this.
Me too. We met at the Faith and Freedom Conference in Nashville, but it turns out I've been listening to you and David Barton with Wall Builders for a while when I was younger. So this is very exciting for me, especially since I spoke with Tim Barton last month. So I got to get through the whole organization. That's what's going on right here. So you're the second stop on that.
Well, you're a brave man, because I have a face for radio. So the fact that you have us on video is probably going to ruin your show forever, but we'll go for it.
Yeah, I get that a lot. I'm sure people will just kind of just shut the video down so they can just listen to us and they don't have to see us.
Right.
But, it's okay. To each his own,
That's right. That's why I have all the paraphernalia behind me, so it'll distract them,
Yeah, I should take a page out of your book then. So before we get into everything, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, man, I used to be a legislator in Texas long time ago, and you mentioned the Bartons got on board with Wall Builders 2 decades ago. Really blessed to get to learn at David's feet for all these years and get to be a part of that amazing museum and the original documents. Started teaching the Constitution about 15 years ago when I ran for Supreme Court here in Texas and barely lost 1 vote per precinct. I'm not bitter at all, no. But anyway, no, it was really close. And but I had fun, I was traveling all over the state, campaigning, doing these events, and really just trying to get people interested in constitutional jurisdictions and principles. And that's really what started the whole teaching Constitution classes, because right after that, people started calling and saying, hey, come do a seminar. And it just kind of took off. And so we've now got 13,000 Constitution coaches that we train and give our materials to. And then they host classes in their living rooms or at their church or library, wherever they want to put people in a room. And it's really helping to get people interested in the principles that produce liberty. We all say we want liberty. The question is, what's on the other side of the equation? What are the inputs that give us the output of liberty? And so that's our passion. We call it Patriot Academy is the name of our organization. We do a youth leadership program as well, where we kind of take over a state capitol for a week, and kids come in 16 to 25 and they get to live the life of a legislator. That's really our flagship. That's what started the program. But man, I'm a blessed man. I got a wonderful wife, 4 kiddos, 2 grandkids, and another one on the way, and get to do what I love, which is, yak my gums talking about what I love, and which is freedom and biblical worldview.
Awesome. Great. So with Patriot Academy, what even sparked you to even go into this? What impressed upon you that it was so important to teach people the Constitution and how that applies to our everyday lives?
Well, bluntly, I'll tell you the real story, man. I was sitting on the House floor at the Texas Capitol, and I was young. I was 27 when I got elected. Very idealistic. I expected to get there and, we'd line up on the House floor and we'd debate the major issues of the day and may the best argument win. So I realized very quickly there were very few people there out of conviction. Most of them were there, for the shrimp and caviar. Yeah, they loved the receptions. They loved having a title before their name. And there was a handful, those a couple of dozen that I would argue were, conviction-oriented folks that were there out of principle. But I realized, especially when issues would come up. This is Texas I'm talking about. And we had a price fixing bill on milk. We had and I'm thinking price fixing. My goodness, I learned about the 70s and Nixon and Ford and Carter, all 3 trying to use price fixing, and all it did was make things worse. I thought we were a free market. Anyway, there was just a lot of issues like that, and I just couldn't believe how little the representatives, the people that were elected to serve in the legislature, how little they knew about economics, about basic conservative constitutional principles. And to be really blunt, I was sitting on the House floor, frustrated, thinking I'm 3 months into my first term, and I'm like, I'm wasting my time. This place is not what I thought it was going to be. So we have these phones on our desk, and I reach under the desk, grab my phone, call my dad, who's my best friend, best man in my wedding, and I called Dad, and I'm like, Dad, man, I'm frustrated. I think I'm wasting my time. Nobody here really is conviction oriented. I want to do something different. And my dad says to me, now, Jeff, you got to understand, this is 1999. So if you get the time machine, you go back to 1999. Who's president of the United States? What's the current scandal? My dad says to me, well, Rick, you need to do what Bill Clinton did.
You might need to expound on that a little bit.
Exactly what I said. You think like I did. I said, Pops, I think you better explain what you mean. And so he says, no, listen. He said, Clinton, when he was governor of Arkansas, he had this thing called the Governor's School. And he would bring in the best and brightest from all over the state for 3 weeks in the summer and indoctrinate them with left-wing philosophy. And so my dad says to me, he's like, why can't you bring kids to the state capitol and just teach them the truth? Just teach them the Constitution, teach them the founding fathers' philosophy of how freedom works. And I had gone to a conference in DC when I was 19 that Young America's Foundation put on. It's called Conservative Student Conference. I think they still do it actually. And at 19 for me, that was an eye-opening experience because I realized I thought I was weird. I thought the fact that I think about politics at 19 or care about what's going on, nobody at school, nobody at my college was like that. So I thought I was really weird. So I go to this conference and I realized, wow, there's other young people across the country that care about this. So I took what Dad said and what I had experienced at 19. I said, well, we're going to fuse these together and we're going to create a program where young people, 16 to 25, when they're really kind of figuring out, what do I really believe? Not what does mom and dad believe? What do I believe? And what am I willing to do to stand for that? That age range, when they're cementing those things, 16 to 25, bring them to the Capitol, let them live the life of a legislator, be on the real House floor in the real committee rooms, let them hear from the best speakers possible, interact with other young leaders, all that, and at the same time, figure out what they want to do. What's their passion? What's the desire that God's put in their heart? And so that's how we started Patriot Academy. I had grand visions of thousands of kids coming through in that first summer. I remember we only had like 21 kids or something like that. And I was like, man, well, Jesus started with 12, founding fathers had 56 on the Declaration, small beginnings, right? And now, man, we do them all over the country, state capitals across the country. We train hundreds and hundreds of kiddos every year. And we got thousands of graduates out there. They're serving in, legislatures now, been elected to all kinds of offices and run campaigns, but a lot of them go into business and education and every area of the culture. So anyway, that's the long story. That was a lot longer than you probably wanted, but that's how we got started.
Good. And so now it's grown. How many members do you have now, if you happen to know off the top of your head?
Yeah. You mean that are part of Patriot Academy or that are serving in legislatures and stuff?
Patriot Academy.
Yeah, we got about 25 employees, and then we train. We got 13,000 coaches, and we train those coaches for free. You can take a class from us for free. All of our Constitution classes are free, and we've got really good technology where your workbook is on your phone or your iPad. You can do physical workbooks if you want, but most people are doing the digital thing. And so about 13,000 coaches out there. And then we do 7 of the academies in the summer. We call them leadership congresses. So we kind of did it regionally where instead of, I used to make everybody come to Texas because I was like, you got to come to the Mecca of freedom, to the Texas state capitol. But we figured out we could reach more kids if we would expand. So now we do one in Idaho for the Northwest and Arizona for the Southwest and Florida for the Southeast, Dover, Delaware for the Northeast, and Colorado for the Rockies. And then we do one in Indiana for the Midwest. So those we do throughout the summer, and then we're building a campus right now, the Patriot Academy campus. We're going to have a mock-up of Independence Hall. We're going to have a really cool legislative hall so we can do these things year-round. And a lot of folks, they're like, I'm not 25. I mean, I'm talking like 70-year-olds come up to me all the time. They're like, but can I pass for 25? I really want to do that legislative simulation thing you got. So I think once we build the campus, we're going to have one where anybody can come and spend the week. And we do handgun training as well. We've got a really cool program called Constitutional Defense where you get the best instruction during the day on handgun defense and really how to handle your weapon well. And then I teach the Constitution at night. So I'm kind of dreaming of having sort of the Disneyland for patriots where people will come in for a week They'll do a handgun class. They'll do their Constitution class in Independence Hall. Then they'll go over and be a legislator for a couple of days and be able to experience what it's like to be inside the belly of the beast, if you will, of a constitutional republic. So that's in the works. We haven't built that yet, but we've got our land, and we're starting on that. Probably be about 2 years before we're doing those programs. But a lot of great stuff going on, man.
Yeah, that sounds like tons of fun. So here's a question. When it comes to teaching the Constitution and all that, what is it? I mean, when you get people coming in, especially people who are a little bit older, what are like the one or two things that surprise them the most about the Constitution that they may not have known about?
I think the number one thing that shocks people is the faith of the founding fathers. I think we've bought this idea that these guys were all atheists, agnostics, and deists, that what made America great was the separation of church and state, that somehow we separated religion from our politics. And they realize when you actually read the writings of the founders, when you look at the debates, when you look at how they did things, the opposite is true. It was actually the influence of faith that everything was based on. I mean, virtually every principle in the Constitution, they trace to some biblical, some scripture saying, the heart of evil the heart of man is evil, that Jeremiah 17:9. Right. So you got to have separation of powers, just all kinds of things like that. I think that's the most shocking to them. And then probably the second most shocking is just how limited the founders wanted government to be, that they really were not scared. They were eyes wide open. I mean, they knew the nature of man, and that when mankind gets power, they abuse it. And so they were just adamant about only letting government do these very few things, and then having all these checks and balances to make sure that it didn't get outside that box. I mean, obviously that has failed in the last 50, 60 years because we stopped teaching the things that would keep it in check. And so now government does all these things they never intended it to do. So they usually leave the class with hope because they realize there is a way to make this work, but with a lot of frustration too, because they're going, I can't believe we let this thing get to the point that we have. And then our job, really, I think the most important thing we do is actually give them the tools to then go work to turn it around, not to just realize how bad it is and how far away from the founding principles we've gone and then just be frustrated, but instead say, okay, now that you realize what's happened, here's the things we can do to turn it around. And it's going to take time. I mean, it's not an overnight solution. There's no president going to ride in on a white horse and save the day. We the citizens are going to have to do this over the course of, frankly, decades. It's not going to happen in just a couple of elections. This is going to be took us decades to get in the mess we're in. It's going to take time to get out of it.
So here's my question. Why do you think that there's so much, why is there so much ignorance when it comes to civics and the Constitution? It seems like schools used to teach that back in the day, but it doesn't seem like we're getting a whole lot of that now. So a lot of people don't really even know, what the amendments say, what the Bill of Rights are, what that means, or the fact that it doesn't give us our rights, that it just protects them, that God gets why is that people don't really know about these things anymore?
Man, we failed. I don't know a nice way to say it. We failed as a culture to pass the torch of freedom, to teach the next generation, the rising generation, to be free. John Jay was, he was one of the guys that gave us the Federalist Papers, advocate for the Constitution, became first Chief Justice of the U.S. Supreme Court under the Constitution. And he said that every citizen ought to read and study the Constitution and teach the rising generation to be free. By knowing their rights, they will sooner perceive when they're violated and be the better prepared to defend and assert them. That quote, really, we build our Constitution classes around that. But we failed to teach the rising generation to be free. We didn't teach them how freedom works. We just sort of thought, well, this thing's working really well and we'll enjoy the blessings of liberty. And so a couple of generations got to live off the fumes of previous generations doing it the right way, teaching those things, fighting for those things. And we let education become literally taken over by cultural Marxists and leftists that no longer cared about the principles of liberty. In fact, hated those things and began to push civics out of the classroom as much. I mean, we do so little on civics now. When you look at state constitutions across the country, the purpose of public education is to have, quote, informed citizens. Like the whole reason to do public education was so that your people would understand how a constitutional republic works and they would stay engaged. They would cast informed votes. We wouldn't be ignorant about civics. Well, now, public education is all about indoctrination on climate, I call it the climate hoax, but the climate change, because it's whether it's freezing or warming, or as long as it's changing, they can ask for billions of dollars, right? So it's all about indoctrinating those kind of things and all these other things instead of civics. I think the numbers that scare me the most are, 74% of Americans cannot name the 3 branches of government. I mean, that's how bad it is.
That's depressing.
Yeah. Oh, isn't it? I mean, everybody thinks it's just AOC, right? Remember when she couldn't name them? but it's most Americans. I mean, she represents.
She's not abnormal.
No. So that's a real problem. It's been that way for a while. 20 years ago when I was in the House, I passed a bill called the Teach Freedom Act. It set up this thing called Celebrate Freedom Week, where every kid in Texas has to study the Constitution and the Declaration every single year throughout their education so that you can spiral that foundation and keep building on it. And we're trying to get that done in all 50 states. I think that will help. But, it's been 20 years and we have to make schools do it. Like we have to enlist parents or people in the community to go to the local school district and say, are you doing Celebrate Freedom Week? It's part of the state law in Texas. You have to do this. It's not optional. And so, it's hard work to get this done, but that's a long answer to simply say we failed to pass the torch. That's changing. More parents are homeschooling, private schooling, or supplementing their public school education for their kids, and they're looking for ways to raise up patriots. We get asked that all the time. How do you raise patriots? How do you raise good citizens? And so we try to pump out material that people can use that's fun and entertaining for the kids. I'm a student of Zig Ziglar. I grew up on Zig. He wrote the foreword to my first book. And so I try to get people to listen to his audio deal called Raising Positive Kids in a Negative World, because even though it's not necessarily about patriotism, it's about just raising a good kid that has work ethic and respect and all those things. And then that will make them a good citizen. So anyway, I'm kind of rambling, but I think your finger's on it. That is the ultimate problem festering underneath for decades. Civic ignorance is ultimately the real problem to everything we see out there. Petty tyrants taking over and doing what they did over the last 2 years, people giving up their liberty for this false sense of security or safety. All of those things are terrible, but they're symptoms of the real problem, which is civic ignorance.
Yeah. We don't know what our government is supposed to be able to do and what it's not supposed to be able to do.
Yeah.
And I recently wrote an article on this, but I mean, if you look at the if you go to the National Assessment of Educational Progress, they have the nation's report card. And when they measured civics, it was lower than 20% for grades for 4th grade, 8th grade, and 12th grade. The percentage of children that were at proficiency level or above when it comes to civics, none of those age groups cracked 20%.
Man.
So now the tinfoil hat, when I put that on, it tells me exactly what you said about the Marxists taking over and pushing civics education out. And it makes sense. I mean, that is where you would have to start, because people won't be able to, you can't fight for rights that you don't know you have.
That's right.
You can't fight for the Constitution if you don't know what it says about what the government is supposed to be able to do and not do. And it's just amazing the level of ignorance that we have out there. So I'm glad that we have organizations like yours, but we need more and more and more, because I mean, even if you look at what's happening in the schools, I mean, Moms for America, they put out a guidebook for parents so they know what their parents' rights are, because this is something we haven't really had to deal with before. Parents didn't really have to assert their rights like they do right now, but you can't do it if you don't know what they are.
That's right. And they're a great group, man. Moms for America. In fact, we're teaming up with them right now. They're going to use our Biblical Citizenship and Modern America course for all their moms. They're going to push that through their cottage meetings. And you look at these moms testifying in these school boards right now. I mean, it's such a cool thing to see. I mean, they have awakened the mama bears, man, and they are in trouble for it. I'm telling you. So I'm hoping that people, even if they homeschool or private school, you still need to be involved in your local school district and still be influencing that local school board, because 80% of the kids are still going to come through there, and that's going to be
we rose up a little bit.
Oh, did we freeze? Let's see.
Yeah, I think you're back now, though.
There we go.
Yeah, so you were talking about the American Moms for America in the cottage meetings.
Yeah, they're going to use our Biblical Citizenship course for that as well. Just to dive deeper into what does the Bible say about how society should work, and you should treat your neighbors, and how you form government. And then how does our Constitution work? How do you do this in the American system under our Constitution? And they've got like 500,000 moms. I mean, massive organization doing great work. And for such a time as this, it's kind of cool. They started not long after we started in 2000. They started in 2004. And both of our
Mhm.
organizations in the last 2 years have just exploded. So it's almost like, we were being prepared for this moment when these
Mhm.
things are so desperately needed. It's for such a time as this moment, I think.
Definitely, there's a synergy there, and one of the reasons I brought up Moms for America, my girlfriend is actually with them, and when I told her that
Awesome.
I was going to be interviewing you, she was really excited, so because she
Cool.
likes you guys a lot too. But yeah, her name is Keisha King. You might know her, but she was one of the moms that spoke out in Florida. I mean, and
Awesome.
yeah, and we talk about this all the time, like it's just ad nauseum, because it seems like there's every day we're seeing examples of people's rights being violated or threatened,
Yeah.
and we see the consequences of not understanding our civic education. But you also talked about biblical citizenship, so I wanted to get into that.
Yeah.
How do you define biblical citizenship? Because I think that's important.
Yeah, absolutely. We did for the longest time our Constitution class that we taught across the country called Constitution Alive. We made it fun and entertaining, not meaning that the Constitution is living and breathing like the leftist jurists believe, but meaning that the old Constitution, the original words on paper, are still alive. They still mean something. They're still
Right.
what the founders intended them to mean in the first place, or what the folks in the 1860s that passed the 13th, the 14th, the 15th Amendments, what did they actually intend by those things, or all the way through all 27 amendments. So we called it Constitution Alive. And then, I realized we were teaching a lot of the biblical foundation, because you can't do that if you're actually following the quotes of the founding fathers. I mean, you can't not do that if you're actually teaching the real history. And but then I realized, most people that were teaching our class were in the faith community. And I was like, well, maybe we need to spend more time on what does the Bible actually say about how to be a good citizen. So we really combine those two things. We say, okay, what's the biblical perspective on what it means to treat your neighbor well? What's it mean to be a good employer, or to serve as a leader in the community? And what does it mean when Jesus says, render unto Caesar what is Caesar's, and unto God what is God's? What does that mean for us, right? We don't live under a dictator Caesar. We live under, we the people are Caesar.
Yeah.
So if I'm Caesar and you're Caesar, how do we do Caesar well? Like, how do we do this job of Caesar, both from a biblical perspective and from a historical constitutional perspective? And so that's what the course does. We basically combine those things and say, let's just be practical about this. How does the system work? What's the design of the Constitution? And then how do we do our job as citizens? Not necessarily running for office, but that might be what some people, are called to do. But just as a voting citizen, influencing legislation or influencing the legislators, how do I do my job well? So it's an 8-week class. We got all kinds of cool people in there: Kirk Cameron, Rabbi Daniel Lappin, David and Tim Barton, Barry Loudermilk, Pastor Rob McCoy, Pastor Jack Hibbs. I'm trying to think. I know I'm leaving people out.
Oh, Pastor Jack, really?
Yeah, Pastor Jack's in there.
I used to go to his church. I'm originally from Southern California. Yeah, I used to go to Calvary Chapel, Chino Hills. Yeah.
Oh man, I love his church, man.
This was back before he blew up.
Yeah. I love, from the beginning, he said, we're not closing our doors. This is not, government doesn't tell us what to do. I love that guy.
That sounds like him.
Yeah. He's so good. So we got pastors. We got Jeremy Boring from Daily Wire in there.
Okay.
I forget who all's in there now, but we really, I hate boring history, Jeff. I slept through that stuff in high school and college. So I don't want some class that's just going to teach dates and names and memorize, the Bill of Rights or whatever. I want it to be entertaining and fun. And so that's why we brought all those people in, and it is. People, believe it or not, they actually stay awake during our Constitution class.
I believe it. I was actually talking to Tim about that. We talked about, where we get it wrong when we're teaching history. And he said one of the problems that we focus so much on remembering dates, remembering, whatever, but then you miss the story. Like you miss what actually happened. And that's what you don't really learn much from dates. You learn from what happened and
that's
what
right.
it means.
The story.
The story. Yeah, exactly.
That's what made me fall in love with it, was that, when somebody gave me that David Barton cassette tape and I listened to him bring history to life, so that I felt like I was in the story, right? I thought I'm seeing it through the eyes of the people that lived it. For the first time, I was like, oh man, this is cool. It's like getting in a time machine. So that's how we try to do everything. We literally take people back in time. A lot of our stuff, we march with the Minutemen at Lexington, and we go to MLK's church where he grew up, and Alveda King tells us all these cool stories from the 60s. It's just, if you tell the stories and you bring it to life, then people will pay attention. So that's why we have kids. I've had kids as young as 8 go through our courses. And then, of course, people in their 90s. and they love it. I mean, they learn from it, and then they get other people. That's why it's growing, because usually they take the class and they're like, I know 10 people that need to go through this course. And so then they sign up to be a coach, and then they host it in their home. And it's exciting to see, man. I really think there's a remnant, being raised up in the country. I think there's a revolution of freedom and people actually falling in love with what it means to be an American now.
I believe that too. And I've been seeing that, especially recently over the past couple of years. I've been seeing it start, and I was surprised by it, because I'm like, is this ever going to happen? But I think we're seeing the beginning of it right now. So I think it's even making what you do even more necessary.
Amen.
Especially when it comes to biblical citizenship. Because when I first heard that phrase, I was like, I don't know exactly what he means when he says that, but that's what we need. And, and we talked about this before, like we're always told, oh, Christians, we should keep our faith to ourselves. We should practice it in our homes and in our churches, but it doesn't need to enter our public lives. We don't need to talk about it. It's annoying. You're so judgmental, blah, blah, blah. So why do you think that so many of us fall for that? Because a lot of us do that. We won't talk about issues pertaining to faith. And I'm not talking about evangelizing. I'm not talking about proselytizing, although that should be done too. But just in general, like, why can't we talk about a biblical worldview in public? We can talk about everything else.
No, man, you're right. It's honestly, I think we bought this idea that somehow, our faith belonged in a particular box, and then our political life in this box, and we just sort of separated everything out, instead of saying, wait a minute, if I truly believe, if faith is really important to me, and if I'm a Christian, then the Bible is the guide to my life. Is there anything that it doesn't apply to, or is there anything that Christ is not Lord over in my life? And if there's not, because anybody that's studying the Bible and saying they're a Christian would have to answer that and say, no, he's supposed to be Lord over everything. Well, then he's Lord over how I vote. He's Lord over how I see government and the issues in government. And I can't separate those things and say, well, for me personally, the one a lot of politicians like to use, for me personally, I'm pro-life. But I wouldn't want the law. I wouldn't want to vote for a law that would require somebody else to be pro-life. I mean, that's like saying, me personally, I don't think the Nazis should kill Jews, but I wouldn't want to pass a law that would prevent them from killing Jews. I mean, it's just as bad. It's the exact same thing.
Yeah, I don't want to infringe on their right to kill people.
Exactly. So I don't know. It's kind of wild that we are that illogical, because it really is. It's not logical to think that way, but I guess we kind of grew up in it, and so we accepted it, because it's been since the early 60s with the Ingle v. Vitale case in 1962 that we started saying separation of church and state. Actually started in 47 with the Everson case, but it became like in fact, what's the Supreme Court Justice Sotomayor, she says this week after the school choice case out of Maine, she said, what was the phrase she used? It was something to the effect of, the court is relegating separation of church and state to be a constitutional slogan instead of a constitutional commitment. And I'm going, it is a slogan. It's not anywhere in the Constitution.
Yeah, you can't find it anywhere.
Exactly. So even a United States Supreme Court justice literally has the thinking that this is the Constitution, rather than a slogan that people have applied to the First Amendment, instead of actually, in fact, I can show you where I think it's separate church and state is quoted over 3,000 times in federal cases, and the actual language of the First Amendment: Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. That's used in, very rarely. They hardly ever actually quote the Constitution. They quote this slogan. It really is a slogan. It's a misapplication of what Jefferson actually meant in his letter when he wrote that letter.
Exactly.
Yeah, you know what I'm talking about. I mean, it's just.
Yeah, Pastor Jack actually taught me that.
Did he really? Oh, I love it. Go, Jack.
He talked about it. Yeah, he talked about it in church one morning. Yeah.
Good stuff, man.
So when we're talking about biblical citizenship, and we kind of got into this a little bit at Faith and Freedom when we were having our conversation. Yeah. The church in general has lost a tremendous amount of influence in America. There was a time when the church had a lot of influence. It still has some of that influence, but it has lost a lot of it. I mean, church attendance has been going down since the 90s. The COVID-19 pandemic didn't help, and a lot of people aren't going back to church when it comes to the numbers. And well, actually, before I even get into other stuff, why do you think that is? Why do you think that the church is losing influence right now?
I think it's like most things in life. Once you water something down and you make it lukewarm, doesn't taste good to anybody, and it
Mm,
becomes something that has so little actual impact. And we stopped saying, how does the church be true salt and light, where it's truly influencing, impacting the culture in a positive way, and we started making it just a place where we wanted people to feel good, and we thought if we just
mhm,
accept everything that everybody does, no matter what it is, and love became defined as that you cannot correct someone, you can't sharpen
mhm,
each other like iron sharpens iron. You're no longer doing the Great Commission, which is to teach them to obey everything he commanded, and instead we're just love, 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 and this weird definition of love that isn't biblical. And it became just lukewarm. We're afraid of being salty, and sometimes we need to be salty. Sometimes we need to be, just truthful. And I think it lost its flavor. The salt literally lost its flavor, and
mm,
so it became, worthless in many ways. And you nailed it. I mean, you go back to the founding era, you go back to really not just the founding era, you go back to so many movements in the country that the church led. I mean, it was
mhm.
pastors leading the way to independence itself. It was pastors leading the way
Yeah.
to end slavery. It was pastors leading
Yep.
the way in the civil rights movement. It was pastors leading the way, whether it's alcoholism or whatever the problem is in the culture. It was the
Mhm.
church being salt and light. Doesn't mean that all churches got it right, because you had pastors that actually advocated for slavery or advocated for things that were
Yep.
sinful
Yep.
things. But it's just like the witch trials. You had pastors doing the witch trials, but then you had pastors saying, you guys are wrong. This is a misapplication.
Yep.
So that salt and that iron sharpening iron was a good thing for the culture, and led to a more perfect union in so many different ways. And man, we just lost that somewhere along the way. I think seminaries became part of the problem. They started teaching this separation of
Mm.
church and state and don't offend anybody. They might not come back next week. I mean, it's also just, frankly, the building fund. It was all about building these big churches. And man,
Yeah.
if I'm very salty on Sunday morning, that big donor might not come back next week. And then I'm going to not be able to make my payment I mean, so many things that just led to us being wimps. I don't know. That's being a wimpy
I
church.
think you got it.
And people and guys like you and me, I mean, if you're going to a church and they're being wimpy and they're afraid to speak out, are we going to go? But no, we're going to go somewhere else. And people that are in need and they're looking for answers, they can get mamsy-pamsy anywhere. Why would I go to church if it's just more mamsy-pamsy? So I think that's the real heart of why more and more people don't go. And I honestly think that if the church is truthful and transparent, not
Mhm.
self-righteous, not the old, um, hypocritical, do as I say, not as I do. Not that. I'm not saying do
Right.
that. But if we're truthful and we're transparent, we say, I'm wretched just like you. I need a savior just like you. Thank God his system works. And thank God you can find freedom when you apply. When we're like, I think people are hungry for that. But that means there's a standard. If I'm saying I'm wretched, that means I'm measuring myself against a plumb line of truth somewhere, and that I need to be drawn to that just as I'm asking others to be drawn. I think that message, people are drawn to that. I don't care if they're young, old, they're looking for truth. They're looking for a standard. They're looking for pastors and leaders that'll say, hey, I'm not perfect either, but he
Yep.
was perfect, and we have an example, and his truth works. They're looking for answers, but we've got to speak those answers, speak that truth.
I agree. I mean, and that's something that we kind of alluded to before when we were talking. I mean, it seems like when I was younger, there was a lot of hellfire and brimstone, self righteousness, hypocrisy, like you're saying. They
Right.
love to tell you that some people speak the truth in love, and some people just love to speak the truth. Some people love to tell you what's wrong with you, but they're not doing it in love. So it
Right.
just seems like what we're seeing today is an overcorrection, because
Yeah.
we want to go the opposite way. And I was going to
We're
ask
so
you, so
afraid
how
of
do?
being that guy, right? I don't want to be that guy I remember on TV when I was a kid,
Yes.
or the church that I was hiding under the pew because it was so bad. I mean, we
Yeah.
don't want to be that guy, and so we overcorrect. I think you're right. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And so now you go to church and you're listening to a motivational speech. It's almost like, Tony Robbins is preaching the message. And, and so I was going to ask you, well, how do you find a balance between the two? But you just said it. I mean, just be real. I mean,
Yeah.
you can be open. I mean, leaders can be open with the fact that they're flawed. No, I don't need to hear your life story every time you get up to the pulpit, but at least be able to acknowledge, hey, I mess up too. Well, I'm preaching this message to myself too,
Amen.
while I'm preaching it to you.
Yeah.
And the thing is, people want a transformational experience, But you can't have transformation if somebody's telling you that there's nothing wrong with you,
Ooh,
that there's nothing that needs to be transformed.
Yep.
So I do believe that that's the reason why the church has lost so much influence. It's gotten so watered down. We swung all the way to the other end, and hopefully there'll be a correction. But I wanted to ask you, because I think part of this problem is what we saw going on with the Southern Baptists. You know, we see a lot of wokeness going on in those churches. And it's funny because Keisha actually had to tell me about this stuff because I wasn't really paying attention to what was going on in that world. Yeah. But there's a lot of, that critical race theory. That's a lot of it. That's where a lot of it was being infused before the schools. Why is this happening? Because I know this is happening with the Baptist churches, but also with others. A lot of this wokeness has creeped in. Is this part of the whole swing to the other side, or what's going on here?
It is, man. And by the way, I love what you said about transformation. People want transformation, but if you're saying, hey, there's nothing wrong with you, everything's fine, that is so good. That'll preach right there, brother.
You can steal that one too.
I'm going to steal that one too, man. I got some other material from you last time we were together. I think you're hitting on, it's almost a selfishness and a wanting to be loved, and wanting to be popular. So if the fad in the culture is critical race theory and wokeism and all this stuff, so many of these pastors run to that, again, like you're saying, the overcorrection. I don't want to be that other guy, so I'm going to be the one that understands, and I'm going to be the one that empathizes, and I'm going to be the one, but then they're identifying with a lie. So the whole critical race theory thing and so much of the wokeism that came out of the BLM movement was so much mistruths and such exaggerations and lies. And it was almost like they went back in time to certain places in America where there was systemic racism literally 50 years ago, and brought that to today and tried to act like that was the America of today all across America. And instead of correcting that, instead of pastors saying, amen, there was a time in America like that. And like when we went through and did our episode in Birmingham and Atlanta and went through all that history, my kids were shocked at the stuff that happened, that you literally couldn't sit at the counter with someone of a different color than you by law. I mean, that is systemic racism, right? Because it's in the law. The system is pushing it. But to say that that's America today, pastors should have said, I acknowledge that is in our history, but thank God we applied biblical principles across this country. And thank God the racist Democrats that push that stuff, their white-only primaries, their all their Jim Crow laws. Thank God that Republicans defeated that stuff, and we don't have that anymore. They should have been truthful about those kind of things. But what I saw was the opposite. The church we were attending at the time this stuff hit started wearing the BLM hats and started all this critical race theory and this really what's that term for what Warnock and Black liberation theology? They were pushing that stuff. And you mentioned the Southern Baptist Convention. I mean, Vody Baucham, friend of mine for 15 years, speaks at Patriot Academy all the time. He's been trying to warn us about this stuff for a long time, right?
I heard.
He's been saying as a black pastor now in Africa, literally teaching in Africa, he has been trying to come back and say, guys, y'all don't understand what this is what cultural Marxism is about, and it's seeping into the churches. I remember when the whole BLM thing hit, I found one of his sermons from like a year before that, and it was such perfect timing and spot on. I think if he had won the presidency, they just had their convention. I wish he had won the presidency.
Yeah.
I think it could have been a real turning point to destroy this cultural Marxism and CRT that was seeping into the church. The fact that he lost makes me really nervous. So many major denominations in America had just gone left. I mean, they are taken over by the wokeism. And you didn't ask for a commentary on all that. You ask, why is that happening? I think it really is pastors and leaders that want to be loved more than they want to be truthful and more than they want to be biblical. They want to be popular and loved. And I think they fool themselves into thinking if I'm loved, then they'll listen to me and I'll be able to teach later. Or I'll be able to preach later and I'll be able to love them into the gospel and into, and even if that is their motivation, I think it's not biblical, and I think it doesn't work. And I'm trying to remember who the pastor was I had on my radio program one time, and I was trying to give him the benefit of the doubt, and he's like, "No, man, Rick, I'm telling you, they're just selfish. They're narcissistic." I'm assuming there's some level of all of those things that's gotten us where we are.
Yeah, and it's unfortunate because even when I was younger in my church life, I mean, churches would talk about racism and the impact
Yeah,
of racism and things like that. But it was more like, what role do we play as Christians in bringing about reconciliation
right.
and unity? There wasn't all this white privilege,
Yeah,
whiteness and all of this other, CRT inspired
right.
stuff.
No, the stuff
And
you're
like,
describing is like I can remember Promise Keeper rallies where,
yeah,
red, white, yellow, black, and brown, man, we're locked in arms, bawling. I mean, like on our knees,
yeah,
crying, saying we can do better. We're here to, I remember those moments, and it was beautiful. That was
yeah.
reconciliation, like you're talking. I'm sorry I cut you off, but as you were
No, that's
describing
okay.
that, I was picturing those moments.
Yeah, that's what it was supposed to be. I saw those things too, and it was beautiful. And it's like you said, Rick. I mean, it was always pastors at the forefront of affecting positive social change,
That's right.
and now it's just like we're just perpetuating the same cultural Marxism. I saw a video on Twitter. I don't know if you saw this, but it was some type of outdoor church service, and you had like a group of black people standing to the right, and there's music playing, and then all these white people bowing down.
Oh, I saw that. Oh,
You saw that.
yes.
And this is supposed to be racial reconciliation. And I was infuriated. I was like,
Yeah,
no, you don't bow to men. You
that's right.
stand up, lock arms, give your hugs or whatever. But nobody should be bowing to somebody else. That doesn't eliminate racism. That doesn't do anything. I remember when, after George Floyd, I saw same videos and they're washing black people's feet. And, I know that, Jesus washed his disciples' feet. I get all that, but
Yeah.
that's not what this was.
Right,
This
right.
was total woke pandering. And what's sad is that these white folks mean well. Like
Yeah,
they actually, they everybody involved in this equation wants to see this stuff healed.
right.
But when you have these leaders in the church and in government and in the activist media and elsewhere that are pushing this message and they're playing on white guilt
That's right.
and using that to foment more division, like you bowing down is not unity. That's actually more division because people are going to see that and they're going to resent it. Because I know I resent the hell out of it. I know
Yeah.
white people do too.
Yeah.
So how do we? This has taken such a root in our culture. How do we uproot it? I mean, I think biblical citizenship is one way, but what do we need to be doing as followers of Christ?
I think we have to love truth again, and I think we always tell the good, the bad, and the ugly. I think if we love truth, then we're going to say, okay, what is the real score here? Like, what's the real story of America? What role did America play in slavery, or what role did slavery play in America?
Mhm.
Tell those true stories, the good, the bad, and the ugly, and then be thankful for the transformation that happened over the last 50, 60 years.
Yes.
Go back to the real dream. Like, first of all, Paul, the apostle, was very clear. There's neither Jew nor Greek. So in the church itself, there's no race. We don't. In fact, I remember when we were at the Ebenezer Baptist Church, and Alveda King standing there. This is the niece of MLK, and she's standing there and she's telling my kids. They're all sitting on the front pew there, and she's telling us stories about her dad was AD King and how he and MLK would preach, and they were the Sons of Thunder, and how their home was bombed one time, and they were in the house, and he's literally getting them out of the house. Then people start rioting. He stands up on a car and starts screaming at everybody, say, stop the violence. If you're going to hit somebody, you're going to throw a bottle, hit me. We can't win if we're violent. It'll never work. And just the whole way that MLK and AD were just adamant about being peaceful. I mean, even MLK, who was a Republican, refused to carry his firearm because he said, even though I have a constitutional right to do this, if I fire back, then I'm going to ruin the movement. So I'm willing to not use my constitutional right in that. I mean, that's supernatural to be able to respond in peace the way that those guys did all throughout that. Unbelievable. But anyway, Alveda, she looks at my kids who are lily white, man. I mean, they're as white as you can be. She looks at my kids and she goes, we're the same race. And my kids are like, and she goes, it's human race. She said, I got black brothers and sisters. I got white brothers and sisters. I got red brothers. And it was like, aha moment for my kids and for me to say, wait a minute, that's the dream right there. It's exactly what MLK said. Content of the character, not color of the skin. Well, what are we doing for the last 2 years? It's all color of the skin. Critical race theory is entirely, it sees every issue, every person through the lens of race. It puts race at the forefront, meaning color of skin, not human race, but puts color of skin at the forefront. And that matters more than your heart, my heart, our actions, our behavior, the things we actually do. What a step backwards. I mean, we literally went backwards 50 years, all that progress thrown down the drain. And it was because of these race baiters. It was because of people that were willing to stand up and say all the, spew the lies that they did in order to divide us, in order to get political power, to do exactly what Joe Biden said we shouldn't do, which is tell lies for political power. Well, how did he say it? Political gain, power, and profit, which then he, goes on to tell lies for political power,
Right. Yeah, of course.
But
he was trying to demonstrate for us.
Yeah. He demonstrates well. I'll tell you that. Anyway, I think we have to tell the good, the bad, and the ugly. Part of the reason we do what we do at Patriot Academy and Wall Builders, we think it's so important to bring back all the black heroes throughout history, because I don't care if you're a little black kid or a little white kid. If you know that Crispus Attucks was the first patriot killed in the Revolution and he was black, and you know that James Armistead was a black double agent spy for the Americans that set up Yorktown, we end the war, because we literally begin and end with black patriots in the Revolution. If you know that America actually was the first nation to end the slave trade, beat England by 3 weeks, and you know that we're the fourth nation to ban slavery completely after a war that killed 600,000. If you know all those things, then you realize, wait a minute, slavery was a condition of mankind. Every nation on the planet had slavery when America was born, and that the American story, while it has bad and ugly in it, without question, the good of the American story actually changed the whole world. When you learn those things, you start going, wow, man, I'm going to stop being African-American or Asian-American, or what. I'm just going to be an American. Red, white, yellow, black, or brown. We're going to stand together, not hyphenated Americans, but Americans, and say, this story is amazing. The American story is unbelievable. Flawed? Absolutely. But compared to the rest of the world, why do you think so many people are fighting to get in? If we're so racist and so bad and so evil, why is everybody trying to get in? Why aren't they building tunnels to get out of America? Nobody's building a tunnel to get into North Korea, right? I mean, they're coming here because the American value system works, and it's created the greatest, I think, least racist nation in the history of the world. Certainly the least racist multicultural nation, where you have all these different ethnicities and stories and from every nation. But it's supposed to be e pluribus unum, right? It's supposed to be out of many one. And what the culturalist Marxists want to do is they want to take the one and split us into all these groups, divide us based on race, divide us based on money, divide us based on mask or no mask, jab or no, whatever they can do to divide us. They win when they do that. And that's how we got in the mess we're in right now. How we get out of it, we preach unity, we preach truth, we tell the good and the bad, the ugly, and then we say, all right, how do we move forward from here? And we move forward from here with the right principles that apply to everybody. We go back to blind justice, equal justice under the law. Right now, we're literally doing the opposite of what we did 50 years ago. Our justice system is based on your color of skin or your political affiliation, and we treat people differently based on that. Man, that leads down roads to real tyranny and total darkness, and we've got to stop that and come back to loving liberty and loving constitutional principles. Sorry, man, I didn't mean to preach. I got excited.
No. I wanted you to, but it's that overcorrection again, right? I mean, you had a time where black people were discriminated against. There was segregation, yada, 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 government enforced segregation. Fast forward to 2022, you've got affinity groups in these schools that are segregated by race. Right. And I'm like, okay, woke segregation is not better than Jim Crow segregation. It's the same daggone thing.
What was the school that did that? They had a separate graduation. Did you see that?
There's a bunch of them.
They're doing a graduation for black kids and a graduation for other. I'm going, what?
But right now in schools, you can have affinity groups where it's just for black people. It excludes white students and anybody else who isn't black. It's horrible. And Parents Defending Education, they've been filing lawsuits against it, but still, that's what these people are trying to do. And it's like, it's like we always say, the good, the bad, and the ugly. The problem is that they always want to leave out the good. And I get that definitely in the past, there were people who wanted to kind of whitewash what happened in history. Fine. Right now, if you ask the average person, regardless of race, color, or political affiliation, they will say we need to teach all of the history.
Amen.
I mean, it's like you look at like Juneteenth, and I'm going to tell you, Rick, I was getting on conservatives on this one, because they fell into the trap. Sometimes we let ourselves be conditioned by the left to think that something's bad when it isn't. We saw how the left was using Juneteenth. They were
And
using
now
it
they want to throw the
promote
baby
division.
out with the bathwater. They want to get rid of it completely when it's a date that we should be celebrating and telling the
Yes!
full story.
Yes,
100%,
exactly.
No, we just filmed. We went down there and filmed at the spot where the announcement was made. We're doing a Texas history curriculum. Texas has its own history class, right? We're doing a Texas history curriculum, and we're actually doing a whole featurette on it because we think Juneteenth should be celebrated and keep them from distorting it and turning it into what they're turning it into. I'm with you all the way on that.
Yeah.
I've been reading on Twitter all these conservatives talking about how bad Juneteenth is, and I'm going, you guys are falling for their nonsense. Don't do that.
You know, the left would be so brilliant if they actually planned it out that way. I know they didn't, but they could have had a better plan for us to fall into because we're going by their framing of Juneteenth. No, they're lying about the holiday.
That's it.
This is what Juneteenth is about. So yeah, I get that they're exploiting it. I get that they're using it to, for white guilt and to focus on the slavery. But what the holiday is about is America moving further towards abandoning slavery. That's right. What the Republican Party did to destroy the Democrats' peculiar institution. That's what Juneteenth is about, and that's what we should be talking about.
Amen.
Let them lie about it. We can't stop them from lying. All we have to do is tell the truth. Like you were saying before, we just tell the truth.
That's it. That's it. I could not agree more. I'm so glad you mentioned that because just last night I'm sitting in my bed reading Twitter and I'm going, oh, guys, stop it. I mean, just because the other side tries to make it, replace July 4th, which I'm like, I'm not even sure they're really doing that. I think sometimes people are twisting what they're saying about it as well. But I was like, wait a minute, what we ought to be doing is saying, look at what Juneteenth did, exactly what you just said, celebration of the Republicans ending Democrats' slavery program and celebration of the Second Amendment that empowered Black Americans in Texas and in other states to be able to defend themselves, to be able to vote, to be able to exercise their rights. I mean, this is a great opportunity.
Are you saying gun control is racist?
Am I ever? Oh my goodness. And the Democrats love it, right? They love gun control and they love being able to choose who is able to defend themselves. This is where, Black Americans should be standing up and saying, do not take away. This is exactly what they did in the 1860s in the southern states. The Democrats did not want Blacks to be able to be armed because then they could fight back against the lynchings. And by the way, 1/4 of the lynchings were whites. It was about 25% of the lynchings were. So these were Republicans in the South trying to defend the rights of Blacks to be able to exercise their constitutional rights, including voting. And the Second Amendment was absolutely necessary. If you were an armed Black in the South, you could live out your freedom. If you were disarmed, you stood a chance of being lynched.
Yeah.
So the Second Amendment, this ought to be, I don't know if you ever follow Maj Toure or not, but he's really good at
He's
this.
a friend of mine. I was gonna bring him up and you beat me to it.
He is awesome. I have not met him. You got to introduce me to him. I
will.
Yeah. He's so good. Yeah. I've been using a lot of his stuff too. I don't know if he uses ours, but I need to be locking shields with him. I love what he does. I've donated to him actually several times.
You guys would have an excellent conversation, so I'll hit him up and let him know that you guys want to chat. But I know you have a limited time, but because we can go on for this, so we have to do this again.
We'll do it again, man. Absolutely.
Yes,
absolutely.
Awesome. So before we sign off, why don't you let everybody know where they can find you?
Yeah, patriotacademy.com has all of our different programs, patriotacademy.com. If you've got young people in your life that you want them to have the opportunity to go through our leadership training for 16 to 25-year-olds, go to the website, patriotacademy.com. If you want to come through our constitutional defense course and learn how to use a handgun effectively, most people that come through the course, by the way, Jeff, have never touched a gun. So most of the people we're training, they're new to this. A lot of them got the bumper sticker, right? Second Amendment, but they don't carry because they've never had any real training. About 55% of the people that come through the course are women. The other 45% are drugged there by their wives. Because most guys think, I don't need to, I'll handle the situation. That's how I was. And then I went through a simulation and I froze and I realized I needed the training. Anyway, so you can learn about that one at Patriot Academy. And then, of course, becoming a Constitution coach. We give it away for free. We want to just give you the intellectual ammunition to defend the Constitution. You don't have to know anything about history, the law, the Constitution. If you sign up as a coach, you become the lead learner. You just put people in the room, play the video, let those experts do the teaching, and then have a conversation about how you apply that in your community. It's a great way to get involved. So all of that is at patriotacademy.com.
Awesome. That's great. Well, thanks for joining the program, and we'll have you back on soon.
Jeff, appreciate it, man. Enjoyed it. Let's do it again.